Eric wanted me to translate some of this. It's pretty much just giving thanks to everything our Creator gave us on this earth. It pretty much like starts with the earth and everything we put on it. We just give thanks, and we all should have one mind to give thanks. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Joe. Joe will be back at the end of today's ceremony to close. And I want to just say Yahweh for the word, Joe, that the Seneca people puts us in the right frame of mind. Whenever we do, whenever we have a meeting, whenever we do something, it puts our minds where it should be, and all our minds should be in that same place. It shall be one. We have an agenda here that we got to fulfill, and we'll try to move things along quick as we can. And but before I go any further, I'm Rick Jefferson. I'm the chairman of the board of trustees for the Seneca Iroquois National Museum and Anosa Glande Cultural Center. Now, along with myself, there are other members of the board of trustees here today, and I'd like to ask them if they would stand up now. We all work together to ensure the success of this beautiful and state-of-the-art building. And again, I want to thank the Seneca Nation, the government, the executive, the council, for providing such a beautiful place to preserve and protect our cultural items that we have, and educate and preserve our history and culture. The first speaker I'd like to call up is Mr. Joe Stallman. Joe is the director of the museum here, and Joe is going to deliver the short history of the Cornplanter pipe tomahawk.
Thank you, Rick. Hi, I'm Joe Stallman. I'm the director for the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. First of all, I really want to extend a thank you to the staff. They have spent the last 3 days cleaning, painting, and updating the cultural center for this event. They have put a lot of time into this. They have really made the place look beautiful. I'm really proud. Not only the staff, but we have had family volunteers come in throughout the week to help the staff. I also would like to thank the Seneca Nation, the president, his staff, the counselors who are seated along the wall, legal, the Cornplanters Descendant Association, the museum board. This list just keeps growing. I would also like to thank the New York State Museum. If it wasn't for them and that ability to come to the table and talk and meet and get to know one another, I don't think we would be here today. Within the New York State Museum, I would like to extend a warm thank you to Gwen Saul, who could not be here today. She is the curator for ethnology at the museum. She's been very integral in this event. And finally, I would like to thank Mr. Mark Shamming, the director of New York State Museum. Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I think we have become friends. I really do think we have a future, and I'm really excited about that path forward. Today we come together for a momentous occasion. It's really a powerful way to begin this new year. I quickly want to share a short story. The first public event I had as director, I went to the Iroquois Genealogical Society monthly meeting. And at that event was Dr. Gwen Saul, and she gave a brief history of the Cornplanter pipe tomahawk. After she gave that wonderful speech, guess what was the first question directed to me as director? No guesses?
When are we getting that?
Exactly. And because of that, it really did spark a community-based initiative, and here we are today. So objects like pipe tomahawks are complex. They have meanings that have changed over time. Pipe tomahawks show how native and colonial desires reshape and repurpose a familiar weapon into a sign of war and peace. One time, the tomahawk was the most feared weapon to the colonial imagination. For some, it was a symbol of Indian savagery. And the tomahawk was a powerful assertion of sovereignty when it was held in restraint. And that's why we have a blade at the bottom and a bowl at top. The bowl is for peace. Throughout his life, I believe Cornplanter was a warrior when necessary, and when needed, showed the restraint that we value in our leaders today. As we proceed today, we must remember where the Cornplanter pipe tomahawk originates. It was created at a time when many Haudenosaunee communities were displaced after the American Revolution. And many Haudenosaunee communities either went to British Canada or they went to Seneca territory at Buffalo Creek. The Seneca stayed here and they desired to live in peace in their original homelands, and you all have. Along the international border between British Canada and the United States, the British kept supplying the native peoples of the Ohio country with guns and whispers of war. The young American government was in dire straits. It was deep in debt, and native real estate was offered the easiest way out for them. In New England, the Americans threatened to uprise against its own government because of taxes. We have several cases of this. In 1788, 1791, we have the Shea Rebellion in Massachusetts, and we also have the Whiskey Rebellion. Americans were uprising against the taxes. New York State often overstepped its role as a state, and through treaty and buying schemes, tried to extract land and other wants from the Haudenosaunee. So states like New York forced the federal government to strengthen its federal jurisdictions. So when it comes to this old debate of federal and state rights, it really started here in New York State with Iroquois peoples, because the state was always trying to get their lands. In Ohio country, America suffered defeat after defeat against native wars against the United States. And America really did come to an impasse where they needed to construct a treaty that would stop the Haudenosaunee from going into those conflicts in Ohio country. And this is where this pipe tomahawk originates. These concerns and threats brought about the Treaty of Canandaigua in 1794, by which the United States established a lasting peace with the Haudenosaunee and guaranteed both native and American land rights. After the negotiations, Washington gifted the pipe tomahawk to Cornplanter for his role in those negotiations. Now, one point that I would like to point out today is that a lot of non-native historians, when they talk about this moment in American history, they often talk about it as a moment where the United States recognized Haudenosaunee sovereignty. But I want everyone to know today that it also went the other way, because those first 10 years of the American government was very tumultuous. And it looked like many times that America would not survive its infancy. And if it wasn't for this treaty, there might not be a United States today. And so that treaty goes both ways, and we need to remember that. And this is a symbol that allows us to never forget. Like I said before, Dr. Saul could not be here today, but she and I, we constructed a timeline of the pipe tomahawk, and I would like to quickly go through that history, so please bear with me. So in 1792, after the treaty negotiations were finalized, Washington bequeaths the pipe tomahawk to Cornplanter. In 1810, after Cornplanter has his dream interpreted, he gives the pipe tomahawk and his Cornplanter name to Smallberry. who thus becomes the Wolf Clan chief. In 1835, Smallberry passes away, and the chief title goes to Ely Parker, but the Pipe Tomahawk stayed with his widow, with Smallberry's widow, for another year. Before she passes away, Ely Parker receives the Pipe Tomahawk. And between 1844 and 1850, Ely Parker has the Pipe Tomahawk in his possession. And while he has it in his possession, he redesigns and recrafts the handle that we see on the Pipe Tomahawk today. And his recrafting of the handle is actually based on Smallberry's widow's description of the handle. And from the other artistic drawings that I've seen of the Pipe Tomahawk, it's very close. In 1849, Ely sells the Pipe Tomahawk for $20 to his friend Lewis Henry Morgan. From my understanding of history at this time, the Tonawanda community was sending Ely back and forth from Tonawanda to Washington, D.C. to trying to preserve Tonawanda land. He might have sold the Tomahawk to pay for some of those trips. I don't know, I'm guessing here, but it's just a guess. On April 27th, 1850, the Pipe Tomahawk is accessioned into the New York State Museum, where it remained until 1947. Until about 1947. This is where the picture gets a little fuzzy. The Pipe Tomahawk was on display in the New York State Museum, and then it disappears. At first, when the New York State Museum realizes that the Pipe Tomahawk has disappeared, they don't tell anyone, they don't file a report, and so they're just kind of quiet about it. And from that point on, the Pipe Tomahawk goes underground. Through the research of George Hamill and several others at the New York State Museum, we do know now that an archaeologist by the name of Ogilvy Davis was the person who stole the Pipe Tomahawk. And that Pipe Tomahawk stayed in his possession until 1980, when at that time it went on to the auction block. So after 1980, it sold to someone, and then again in 1990, the Pipe Tomahawk is advertised for sale by a private dealer in New York City. The New York State researchers reviewed their records, and they had at that point to publicly declare that the Pipe Tomahawk was stolen. So it took about 40 years, right, Mark? The reason why they finally declared it at that point is because they needed to make a case for the Pipe Tomahawk. Between 1990 and 2010, the pipe pops up at auction houses, private collector shows, and then finally in 2010, the last person who purchased it, it remained in their possession for about 8 years, and when he passes, his widow contacts the State Museum to tell them that she would like to gift the Tomahawk back to the museum. And this was in 2018. And so on June 20th, 2018, the Pipe Tomahawk finally returned to the New York State Museum. And then finally in February of 2019, as we all know, the Pipe Tomahawk came here to the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. As you recall, you were here at that time. I was up here the same role as MC, proclaiming that Tomahawk belonged here because Cornplanter was one of us. He's Seneca, and his blood flows through our veins here. And at this time, I'd like to make a request and ask all descendants of Cornplanter to stand up at this time. Yahweh, As you can see, Mark, the blood is here. Cornplanter was here. And his legacy definitely lives on with us. And it's a great day that the pipe Tomahawk is coming back here permanently. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the president of Seneca Nation, Ricky Armstrong.
Thanks, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone. Noise stand. I'm honored to welcome my colleagues in the Seneca Nation government here today, our guests from New York State, many neighbors and friends, and most of all, my fellow brothers and sisters. Today is truly an important, historic, and meaningful day for all Seneca people everywhere. Especially meaningful to me today as our nation's president. In Seneca history, the name Cornplanter stands out among our greatest and respected leaders. In the time of the American Revolution, Cornplanter stood for and defended our sovereignty, while also forging a diplomatic bond with the new United States government. That bond took shape in the form of the Treaty of Canandaigua, in which the United States pledged to honor, respect, and defend our rights to our land. George Washington was so impressed with Cornplanter that he gave him this Tomahawk pipe as a gift of friendship and respect. In the 200 years since then, Seneca leaders have struggled to defend our sovereignty, and we have seen some of our agreements broken, but never our will to live as sovereign Seneca people. Even as Cornplanter himself had his final resting place moved in the egregious betrayal known as Kinzu removal, the Seneca people resolved that what was promised to us and what is rightfully ours, our recognition as sovereign people, would never be stripped away from us. It is that recognition which is reflected in this important artifact. It is more than a tomahawk pipe or a war tool. It is an enduring lesson for all Seneca people, for our friends, neighbors, and visitors, that we are Anahuaca, that this is our home and our place granted by the Creator, and is forever recognized as such by all. Last year, for the first time in 150 years, Cornplanter's Tomahawk returned back to Seneca territory. It was originally supposed to be on loan to us. How can you loan someone a piece of who they are? How can a reminder of one's central identity be given to them temporarily, as if they were borrowing money from a neighbor or taking a book out of a library? Thankfully, others saw and understood the significance and meaning of Cornplanter Tomahawk. People who quickly understood that there was only one true home for this piece of Seneca history. It is through their understanding and with this cooperation, finally, that this piece of our great leaders' remarkable legacy can finally and for all time remain on Seneca land where it belongs. On behalf of the Seneca people, I want to thank Mark Shammy from the New York State Museum, members of the Western New York delegation, including Assemblyman, especially Assemblyman Sean Ryan, and many others who saw something that was not right and worked with the Seneca Nation to make it right. We are grateful for your cooperation in returning this important artifact to nation ownership, and in doing so, you have shown the spirit of respect for our nation, our people, and our sovereignty, which President Washington first presented this gift to Cornplanter. Now that it is home for good, we hope that Cornplanter's Tomahawk will shine as an example of those same ideals, and as a lesson in diplomacy, and as a permanent reminder to all Seneca generations of our collective responsibility to defend our identity, protect our sovereignty, and our home. Now,
Yahweh, Rick, for those fine and inspiring words. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce everyone to Mark Channing. He's the director of the New York State Museum in Albany, and instrumental in making this transfer happen today. I think that when it first came back into possession, they didn't realize how strong our sentiment would be here. And I think through time and just plain talking with each other, this is why this is happening today. So without further ado, Mark Channing.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the very warm welcome I've had here in the last day and a half. I also want to thank you and recognize a number of people, but I bring greetings to you from Chancellor Rosa, the New York State Board of Regents, the New York State Education Department, and the New York State Museum. They're all thrilled about what's going on here today, and it's momentous for all of us. I'd also recognize on their behalf President Armstrong, Seneca Nation counselors present today, Seneca Iroquois National Iroquois Museum Chairman Rick Jemison, Seneca Iroquois National Museum Director Dr. Joe Stone. And he's correct, we are now tight friends, great colleagues, and we're looking for good things ahead. I just want to mention one other person, President Armstrong. Ron Kenjakity gave me a great tour of Seneca sites, Seneca Nation. We spent 3 hours up and down the Allegheny Reservoir, every street, every building. I thought we were going to get stuck in the snow. So thank you, Ron. So I was last here on September 26th, and I see a number of you again today. I was the first state museum director to formally visit the Seneca Nation, and I gave a talk. We had a memorable conversation, and I told you I'd be back. So here I am. Museums collect objects of human and natural history to research, teach, exhibit, and preserve for generations. I believe, as do my colleagues, that while it's important to collect, it's just as important to place artifacts, both sacred and historic, in the care of those who rightfully own them. I think this is a historic day for us all. In one of several meetings between the United States and Haudenosaunee leaders in the years 1792 and 1794, United States President George Washington gifted this pipe tomahawk to Cornplanter, respected Seneca leader and skilled diplomat, who received it on behalf of the Seneca Nation. As Joe mentioned, to much of this, some thanks to the generosity of an anonymous donor, the pipe tomahawk returned to the State Museum on June 20th, 2018. In this respect, I want to recognize some of the many people who worked to preserve, research, track, and finally safeguard this historic artifact since 1850. State Museum's first state archaeologist, Arthur C. Parker, beyond being a really instrumental and first professional archaeologist in New York State, maybe anywhere, he also amassed a great collection and saved this from the Capitol Fire of 1901. Former State Museum Director, my mentor, the late Dr. Martin Sullivan, State Museum Ethnology Curator George Hamill, and my colleagues today at the museum, Dr. John Hart, Dr. Lisa Anderson, and of course, Dr. Gwendolyn Saul. The pipe tomahawk, held by both George Washington and Cornplanter, resonates with our collective history. Embedded in it is our shared past. It represents Washington and Cornplanter's work to establish peace after years of war. In its potent symbolism and in the spirit in which it was first given and received, it is an object to be revered by all people of the Seneca Nation and all Americans. The return of the pipe tomahawk to its rightful place begins a new chapter of the strong affiliation, a renewed compact between the New York State Museum, the Seneca Nation, and the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. It is my great honor today to formally return the Cornplanter pipe tomahawk to the Seneca Nation. Let this gesture represent mutual trust, partnership, and fruitful years ahead, as was intended by our forebears. Today, I sign and transfer the Cornplanter pipe tomahawk on behalf of Chancellor Rosa, the New York State Board of Regents, and the New York State Museum to the Seneca Nation, with the only caveat being that the ownership of the object remain forever with the people of Seneca Nation.
Thank you, Mark. And before we do the actual transfer or repatriation as it's called, I'd like to ask Becky Bowen to come forward and say a few words. Becky is member of the Cornplanter descendants in the association. And so I bring you Becky Bowen. Yeah.
Now we stand up so they will. Rebecca Bowen de Gapso. Juanicio, it's a good day. On behalf of the Cornplanter Descendants Association, we, the 6th, 7th, and 8th generation descendants of Cornplanter, extend our hands in heartfelt appreciation, way so now, to the New York State Museum under the guidance of Mark Shamon for the safe return of Cornplanter's pipe Tomahawk. I'd like to take this time here to present a gift to Mark. This is treaty cloth, we call it. And it comes because of the Treaty of 1794, which has the mark of Cornplanter. And that treaty is alive, and this reflects that. And we honor it, and in the Constitution of the United States, it says that treaties are the supreme law of the land.
Yeah.
Cornplanter, a warrior chief skilled in diplomacy, led our people through a turbulent and dangerous time. He and the other leaders of his day had the foresight to fight to preserve the homelands where we stand today. And although the landscape has changed in the last 60 years, he walked a new well that'll heal our beautiful river and this valley. While significant in Seneca history, he was also a father, a grandfather, an uncle who loved and protected his family. Despite the dark and seemingly hopeless events of his day, I'm thankful he never lost sight of us and never lost hope for our future. So we are here on this good day to represent our grandfather, to say the long journey of Cornplanter's pipe Tomahawk is complete, to say welcome home.
Thank you, Becky. At this time, the moment that we've all been waiting for, the transfer will actually take place. I'd like to ask Mark to stand up and Ricky.
Well, I'd just like to say really on behalf of President Washington, all New Yorkers, all Americans, we're proud and privileged to return the pipe Tomahawk, or Planter's pipe Tomahawk, to Seneca.
Yeah, we are fortunate, we are appreciative of all their efforts, and we are strengthened by having this artifact, this piece of Seneca history back within our territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ricky. That was the moment we've all been waiting for. A long time coming, but thank goodness, Cornplanter's pipe Tomahawk is finally home amongst us. Now, before we close, on behalf of the Seneca Iroquois National Museum, as is our custom, we have something for you, Mark Shannon. We have a gift we'd like to present. Johnny? On behalf of the Seneca Iroquois National Museum and the Seneca people, I'd like to present you with this beautiful beaded pillow. That you can keep in a collection. Yeah. Okay, before we end today's festivities, I'd like to ask Joel if he would come back up and close it for us in the event ceremonial group. Not Joel, I see Blake Culchie coming forward.
I actually think we should make it official by smoking the pipe. Well, it's our custom, when we do canonical, we open up our meeting. It's customary to do a closing as well. So I'm gonna try and,
Ask them to shut off the cameras.
yeah, have everybody shut off their cameras. Recording. Please turn your phones down. If you got your phone on,